every day we get more and more new teasers that make us more and more excited for the second episode. In this teaser, you can see a bunch of dummies furiously chasing after Pomni and Jax while Kane is watching the whole thing with his usual smile on his face. It reminds me of the previous teaser where Kane was also happily watching the fire in the circus. And if you think that these NPCs want to harm our characters, you are very wrong, because we all know that the dummies in Candy Canyon Kingdom are very different from the ones we saw in the digital circus and in Candy Location. They are friendly and very hospitable, and I think in this case, they just don't want to let our characters go home to spend more time in Candy Kingdom. And if Pomni wants to run away after all she's been through, Jax doesn't seem to mind hanging out with the Candy characters. And Gooseworks also showed us one of their old concepts, featuring the now forgotten Gooby character that many predicted would be in the second episode. But apparently, we will only see her in our dreams, because we have already seen the full cast of the first season. And if Gooby will appear in the new episodes, it will be as a minor character that will not affect the plot. And now let's talk about everything else related to the second episode, because we are only 6 days away from the release. Hello everyone, and look closely at the moment where Kane teleports Pomni, Ragatha, and Gangle to Candy Canyon Kingdom, and we see a smile on Gangle's face. And then one more fragment from the trailer also shows us Gangle's smile. But we all remember that in the pilot episode, the Joy Mask broke, and as far as we know from the leaks, Gangle has no spare masks. So we can think that either Gangle could learn to repair her Joy Masks, or Kane took pity on her and gave her another one. But I'm more interested in whether Gangle will be able to keep her mask intact in the second episode. And judging by the rest of the trailer, the Mask of Joy will be broken again as soon as Gangle is in Candy Canyon Kingdom. And also, it is necessary to look carefully at the moment of teleportation itself. And if most of the audience is sure that in this moment of time Kane teleported only these 3 girls, then you are very wrong, because at a closer look you can see silhouettes of Jax and Kinger. And this already tells us that there will be no division into groups as it was in the pilot episode in this case. Then we are shown a familiar scene where we learn what Candy Canyon Kingdom is, and in the next scene we see the familiar gummy elephant that Gooseworks announced more than a year ago. And even in this scene, there is a small reference that the new episode will be about Jax or Kinger, but I'm almost 100% sure that the new episode will be about Jax, and you'll see why in the future. And here comes that long-awaited moment when our circus group arrives in the city, where they are happily greeted by a crowd of mannequins. And if you remember the pilot episode in which all the mannequins are similar to what we see in real life, and some of them even pose a threat, then just in Candy Kingdom, all the mannequins are friendly characters who are only happy to welcome new guests. Candy Castle itself is made very qualitatively and includes a lot of small details. Also, the attention of the audience was drawn to the figure that hangs over the city, and over the 2 days, I heard a lot of theories about what it could be. Starting with the moon and ending with Kane's closed eye, thanks to which he keeps an eye on everything that happens. But even in this same scene, there is at least one more of the same element, and throughout the trailer we will see many of these orbs. And I'm sure it's nothing more than a decorative element that decorates Candy Canyon Kingdom. But few people have noticed the mural in the center of Candy Castle where you can see someone's image, and I have a few theories about who it could be. The most logical one is that it depicts the king of Candy Canyon Kingdom, who left all his lands to his beautiful daughter, Princess Lulilalu. But why haven't we had any mention of this character and why he was never shown in the trailer? There is a theory that the king of Candy Kingdom died a long time ago, and now there are only memories and frescoes, or maybe even small sculptures that we can show in the new episode. But what makes us all think that the king of Candy Canyon Kingdom is dead? If we zoom in, we can clearly see a familiar silhouette that looks a lot like Kane. And then I have a theory that Candy Canyon Kingdom doesn't exist at all, and it's all just one big fantasy that Kane created to get rid of the characters he's tired of. I mean, look how happy he was when he sent everyone there. And then, really interesting events begin, and Gooseworks immediately decided to show us all the mood of the new episode, and in one of her posts, she also stated what mood the second episode will have. And if we look at everyone individually, Gangle has lost or broken her mask of joy again and is crying all the time again. Kinger, as usual, does not understand anything, but Pomni understands that something terrible is about to happen, and unfortunately, it will happen to Pomni. Jax never ceases to surprise us, and as usual, he came up with something that everyone else will not be happy about. And judging by his smile and candy shotgun in his hands, we understand what will happen next. The scene with Pomni doesn't do anything useful for us, but then we are introduced to the main villain, Gumagoo and his gang, Max and Chad. And that's official information. I think Max is this purple alligator and Chad is the one sitting next to him. We notice that Gumagoo is watching something, and it seems to me that his main target will be Candy Castle. You can see that the gang of alligators is located in the desert and next to park their truck, which we will meet in the trailer. And as a fun fact, these gangsters have only food with them, namely eggs and 2 candy daggers that look more like candy. I think this location is temporary, while the plan is being worked out. The scene with Pomni inside her room is also meaningless, and I can only say that the amazing digital circus is 100% a game, because the collision of Pomni with the cube and the resulting glitches directly hint that this action is not written in the game code. And did you notice the spare hat and shoes in Pomni's room? And if we look closely, we realize that the size of the spare hat and the one on Pomni's head are different, and maybe the second hat is just a toy. The next scene was shown to us about a month ago, but then we had only an image on which nothing was clear. The main question was what our characters were standing on, but after a while we realized that it was the second truck that was shown in the next scene. But back to the fact that Ragatha is clearly dissatisfied, and the question is what? It is unlikely that Kinger did something, but the sarcastic smile and genuine satisfaction on Jax's face directly tells us that it was Jax who caused Ragatha's nervous breakdown. But what he did, you will learn a little later. In the meantime, think about what shadows we see behind the characters. And here is the next fragment and shows us the chase of the circus residents after the Gumagoo gang. And the reason for it, as I think, is the familiar Pomni, who is hysterically holding on to the roof of the truck in the hope of saving her life. And pay attention to how skillfully the truck with characters rammed the Gumagoo truck. However, in the next frame, we see that it didn't go without consequences and some mechanism was damaged, which led to skidding on the road. Pomni is still hanging on the roof, but Max apparently couldn't hold on during the collision and fell out of the window, but his ability to control the lasso perfectly made itself felt, and in the next shot we see that the truck with the Gumagoo gang also felt the effects of the collision and started to twist violently while Max was able to successfully climb on its roof. And then we are shown the scene where Max is captured by the circus residents and left to be followed by Jax. That's the most popular theory, but do you think everyone else could have gone somewhere in a location they know nothing about? I think everyone else was trying to fix the truck, but apparently they couldn't. And also, an interesting detail of this scene is that they are on the water, and so theoretically, since the truck is made of candy, they can successfully float on it. But since nothing more interesting about Gumagoo and his guys was not shown to us, we can be sure that this is the end of their storyline. And we move on to the scene where we are shown a floating truck, and in the distance some silhouette flies out of the water, and apparently we can say that it was Pomni. And another interesting detail that I noticed is Gumagoo's binoculars, which now appeared in Pomni's hands, and apparently he gave it to them in exchange for his partner and also told them where to look for Pomni, but as you already know, Pomni found himself. And if you look more closely, it is noticeable that Pomni appeared near the rock, which will also play one of the key roles in the new episode. As you can see, Pomni could not have flown out at that speed by herself, which means that someone planted her, and I think all the residents of the circus realized it. And most likely at that moment, Jax decided to take control of everything and went to the very rock near which it all happened, and that's when this scene happens. And I was wondering if you could guess what made Ragatha so angry with Jax. However, the fact that the car is broken is not the biggest threat, because this rock is home to our old friend Fudge Monster. And if we remember his first appearance, we can safely say that he looked like an alligator, actually like Gumagoo and his gang. But already in the trailer, he appeared to us in a slightly different video. Does this mean that Fudge Monster can take any shape and become any size? Because if we look at the next scene where the second truck is on the verge of being swallowed by the Fudge Monster, it is obvious that he was able to lift the huge truck with only one tail or hand. And by the way, as you could notice, in this scene, Fudge Monster is again in the role of an alligator, which proves to us his teeth that are identical to what we saw in the announcement of the first season. But what happened to Pomni and why she was thrown out so abruptly? I think it was the Fudge Monster that threw Pomni out with such a great force. But I think everyone was confused by this scene where Pomni is in the basement and we notice her body will abstracted, and it started with her arm as it was in the pilot episode. But I think it's just Pomni dreaming or hallucinating after the fall. And lastly today, we will talk about Princess Lulilalu and her very strange gift to the circus people. Namely, this key, which has already made itself known. Some people think it's the key to the city. It's a so-called Medal of Valor. And some think it was the key that our guys used to turn on the engine of the truck, but I think everyone realizes that this is nonsense. Most likely this key is just symbolism and a kind of gift. But thanks to it, the circus residents will be able to open one of the Candy Castle rooms and enjoy a nice dinner before Kane brings them back. But everything will be known for sure only on May 3rd. Huge amount of leaks, old teasers, and many other things completely reveal us the plot of the second episode. And in this video, I will tell you what to expect on May 3rd. Hello everyone, and we know exactly who will be the main character of the second episode. Who will be the villains, the main location, the main plot twists, and also a huge amount of secrets. And for starters, we have to go back to February and remember this leak from Glitch, which shows Pomni sleeping, and accordingly, it became clear that since this leak of the second episode was the first one, this scene will open the new episode. And if you remember the scene where Pomni starts to turn into abstracted monster, then I am 100% sure that this scene is just a dream that Pomni saw after all the horror she experienced during the whole pilot episode. And I think that meeting with abstracted Kaufmo and the time period when she was on the verge of turning into that monster was the most memorable and powerful part of her memory. And then in the preview for the first season of The Amazing Digital Circus, Kane suddenly bursts in. And that's where the fun begins. Everything that was shown in the preview has no value for us. Unlike the scene with Pomni and one of her cubes where they safely crashed into each other and then Pomni started glitching. Perhaps Kane scared Pomni and most likely all the inhabitants of the digital circus tent so badly that Pomni fell, and we saw this. And the logical continuation will be the meeting of all the inhabitants of the digital circus together, as it was many times in the pilot episode, and this scene shows us that. And actually, a fragment of this scene was shown to us a long time ago, which also confirms my version. Then most likely our characters had breakfast and spent some time in peace, but after a couple of scenes we will see how Kane again gathered everyone and sent them to travel through Candy Canyon Kingdom. And in general, everything is clear, but we don't see Zooble, and apparently she decided to support her trend of the pilot episode and again abandoned Kane's adventure, which probably made Kane very angry. And if in the pilot episode we saw a pretty light punishment, now I'm afraid to imagine what Kane will do to Zooble, considering that during the rest of the trailer we don't see this character anymore. And let's remember this leak where Zooble says something to Jax. Maybe she was asking him to talk to everyone else to get them to give up the candy adventure. Once our residents got to Candy Canyon Kingdom, things initially went well, and some of them even experienced satisfaction, such as Gangle. And surprisingly, this is the first time in a long time that we see Gangle so happy, but not for long. In Candy Canyon Kingdom, we meet Princess Lulilalu, who will most likely tell us that somewhere in the territory of the kingdom, there is a very cunning alligator called Gumagoo, and he has his own gang. But to be honest, these two don't look like reliable partners. Their names are Max and Chad, but we don't really care about that. So Princess Lulilalu gives us a very important task that is not as easy to handle as it may seem at first glance. We need to find Gumagoo and his boys to take something away from them, and I think the main mission is to save the binoculars. I agree with you that it sounds weird, but it's The Amazing Digital Circus. In the previous episode, a giant worm ate Zooble, so it's no surprise. But then there's the obvious question, why couldn't Princess Lulilalu just meet the guests and show them around? The answer is hidden in this moment, which if you zoom in reveals a very interesting detail. We see a mural on which some character is depicted, and most likely it is Caine, because after all, he is the main administrator of this amazing digital game. And I think that's when we find out that Candy Canyon Kingdom is not an independent location. And yet we remember how Caine once revealed the secret of the Void and said that it was just one of his unfinished projects, and that if Candy Canyon and everyone who lives in it is just the final project that was originally the Void. That's funny. And then our characters led by Jax went in search of alligators and most likely found their shelter. And then we realized that Gumagoo is not just a negative character, but the main villain of the new episode. And after our circus people, and most likely Jax, did not think of anything better than to steal a second truck to make Gumagoo go after them, they did steal it. And since we know that Jax is an excellent marksman, he decided to give the control of the truck to the most depressed character. And then Jax felt in charge again, and this time Pomni was in his sights and apparently was determined to jump on Gumagoo's truck and somehow steal the binoculars. But we've all seen how that turned out. And then Jax decided to take control of the truck and decided that ramming the other truck was a great idea, and I suspect it was after that that the circus truck went astray, but the Gumagoo truck was also damaged and spun around a lot. And from this scene, we understand that Gumagoo ordered Max to climb on the roof and push Pomni off, but after the collision, Max himself fell while Pomni managed to hold on. Jax went back for Max, and they went to a place very far away from Candy Castle where they took Max prisoner. And the funny thing is that in this location, instead of the ground, we see a small layer of some liquid. And while the rest of the circus residents decided to look around and figure out where to go next, Jax stayed behind to watch Max. And you'd think he wouldn't trust anyone else to do the job, so he decided to stay behind. But I think the others, most likely Ragatha, just forced him to stay. And since in the next scene from this location we don't see Max, but we do see the binoculars, I have a theory that Gumagoo was able to find the kidnappers of his partner and exchanged him for the binoculars. But the question about Pomni remains open because after that we never saw her again. Most likely Gumagoo just got tired of it and decided to throw it away somewhere in this so-called lake. But what is very strange is the moment where Jax and Max are calmly standing on the water, but then we see Pomni flying out of the water with great speed, and we realize that after that, the main events will take place on the lake. Although maybe it's the sea, but it doesn't matter. After all the characters saw the amazing flight of Pomni, Jax again decided that he is in charge, and without asking anyone just took control of the already floating truck and went towards Pomni. And in the previous video, I already told you that no one paid attention to this rock that hides a lot of interesting things, and most importantly, we realize that that's where our characters are stuck. And if you think that this so-called accident that made Jax very happy and Ragatha very angry happened because of the natural terrain, think more carefully about why Pomni could have been so much out of the water and who could have helped her. And also, maybe Ragatha is not angry, but on the contrary, very frightened and so expresses her emotions. It is quite possible, and the next frame confirms it, and we see how Fudge Monster took control of the truck with passengers and wants to eat it very much. But apparently our friends managed to get out and escape from this monster, and after that our circus people went in search of Pomni, which judging by the trajectory of movement fell near the place of takeoff. And then a miracle happened, and apparently Pomni was found, which can be seen in the following scenes where the whole cast of familiar characters met Princess Lulilalu, who greeted them very kindly after their return. And I think all those friendly dummies were very happy to see them back. After that, we saw Princess Lulilalu hand Ragatha some strange key that has already become one of the main secrets of the new episode. Some think it's the key to the truck, but even if you think about it a bit, the truck was in the first half of the episode, and this scene is clearly the end of the episode. Some have suggested that the key is just a symbolism and has no value and is just a souvenir from the princess to thank her for her work. But again, that's too easy for Gooseworks. And so I'm more inclined to believe that this key will play a role in the episode, and we will see Regatha open one of the doors inside Candy Castle with this key and see a huge table with sweets in front of him. And after their dinner, they are joined by Caine, who gives them the good news that they are returning to the digital circus. Bye-bye, everybody.